She was in a freezer, in the kitchen of the apartment she shared with him, and by the time anyone realized something was wrong, he was already on the other side of the world, gone. But the detail that stays with you is not how he ran. It's the lie he told before he left. A photograph. A woman in an orange jumpsuit, sent to her family to explain where she was. He told them she had been arrested, shoplifting, 5 years. And the photo made it believable, so they trusted him. Because why would a husband lie? But the truth was something else entirely. That woman had never been arrested. There was no case, no charges, no prison. Because she wasn't behind bars. She was already dead. This is the story of Lina Guerra, a woman who spoke to her family every single day, until one day, she didn't. Before everything that happened, before the lies, before the investigation, there was Lina. If you're interested in real cases like this, the ones that go deeper than what people usually see, consider subscribing to Obscura Case Report. There's a lot more like this coming. To understand this case, you have to start with who Lina was. Not how she died, who she was. Lina Maria Guerra Echevarria was 39 years old. She was Colombian, from a small, close-knit family. Before coming to the United States, she had lived with her cousin in Medellin. Her cousin, Pilar Angel Echevarria, would later describe their relationship not as cousins, but as sisters. There wasn't a single day that we didn't talk, Pilar told reporters from Colombia, speaking through a translator. In the morning, in the afternoon, at night. That was Lina. She was the kind of person who checked in, who called, who showed up, even from thousands of miles away, through the phone every single day. Her family described her as empathetic, loving, always putting others first. She was adventurous, hard-working, very humble, her sister-in-law Paula Ramirez would later say. She put others above herself. Her aunt, Elizabeth Echevarria, would describe her even more simply. My little girl, she said. That was how Elizabeth thought of her. Her little girl. Lina had moved to Miami at some point before 2015. It was there in Miami, Florida, that her life intersected with the man who would become her husband. His name was David Varela. He was working as a cook at a restaurant. She was working as a waitress. They met. They got to know each other. Within about a year they were married. To the family in Colombia, it looked like a good match. He was intelligent, they said, calm, religious. He seemed devoted. He seemed safe. He appeared to be very religious, very calm, normal. Paula Ramirez would later tell reporters. That's why this is so shocking. We never imagined he'd do something like this, but that is how it often works. The violence does not announce itself. It hides, behind calm, behind religion, behind the face that the family sees at holidays, and in photographs. The real face comes later. Often, by the time it appears, there is no easy way out. And then there was David Varela, the man at the center of everything that followed. David Varela was 38 years old. He was an electrician, not in a private company, in the United States Navy. He had enlisted in 2007 when he was still in his early 20s. That first enlistment took him to the USS San Francisco in 2008, a submarine based out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. He served for several years before separating from active service. Between 2012 and 2017, he was out, a 5-year gap. What he did during that gap, where he went, how he lived, that is not fully part of the public record. What is known is that in 2017, he re-entered the Navy Reserves, in Miami, the same city where he had met Lina, the same city where he had been working as a cook when their lives intersected. From that point forward, he was an active-duty Navy reservist, an enlisted man, an electrician. His service record stretched back more than a decade. By early 2024, he and Lina had relocated to Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk is a Navy city. It is home to Naval Station Norfolk, the largest naval station in the world. The entire culture of the city is shaped by its relationship with the military. The apartment buildings downtown fill up with service members and their families. The restaurants and bars and shops cater to a transient population of people stationed there, often against their preference, often far from home. Lina Guerra was one of those people. She had not chosen Norfolk. She had followed a husband there because that was what his assignment required. They lived in the Icon apartment building on East Main Street, a modern building in downtown Norfolk, a nice address. Varela had plans, according to family, to retire from the Navy relatively soon. More than a decade of service behind him. The end of his military career approaching. On paper, everything about David Varela looked like a man building something legitimate. Military service, stability, a home, a wife, a future. Or that was how it appeared. What the family would later learn, what would only emerge in the months after Lina's death, was that the relationship had not been what it seemed from the outside. It had not been equal. It had not been free. Paula Ramirez, Lina's sister-in-law, speaking through a translator, described the situation plainly. Varela was jealous. He would not allow Lina to work. He would not allow her to have friends. He would not allow her to study. He would not allow her to go out alone. He had hit her previously, Ramirez told reporters, but she didn't tell us, because she didn't want to worry us. That sentence. She didn't tell us, because she didn't want to worry us. It appears in so many cases like this one. It is one of the most heartbreaking phrases in the vocabulary of domestic violence. The person being harmed, protecting the people who love them from knowing, carrying the weight privately, not because they don't trust their family, but because they know that telling would cause pain, would cause worry, would potentially escalate a situation they are already struggling to manage. Lina had a close family, a family she spoke to every single day, and she protected them from the truth of what was happening in that apartment. She described Varela as intelligent. She was grateful to him, she said. She admired him. She never ever spoke ill of him, Paula Ramirez said. She always spoke highly of David. That is what the family heard. That is what they knew. The pattern of control, the isolation, the violence, that was something Lina carried alone, in an apartment in downtown Norfolk, thousands of miles from the people who would have done anything to help her. If only they had known. If only she had told them. But she didn't tell them, because she didn't want to worry them. And that decision, that act of love, may have cost her the one thing that could have saved her. The chance for someone to intervene, before it was too late. And then one day, everything stopped. Lina Guerra was last heard from, on January 16, 2026. That was the last day anyone in her family spoke to her. She called them, as she always did. Morning, afternoon, night. She was the kind of person whose calls you could set your clock by. Her cousin Pilar had described their communication as daily, constant, unbroken, not weekly, not when she had something to say. Every single day. That rhythm had been in place for years. And then, on January 16th, it stopped. January 17th came and went. No call. January 18th. Silence. The family reached out to David Varela. His response was immediate. Calm. He had an explanation. Lina had been arrested. She had been caught shoplifting clothing, and she had been sentenced to 5 years in prison. He said he was devastated. He said he had not stopped crying. He said he had not been able to eat for more than a day. He performed the role of a grieving, shocked husband, with what would later seem like clinical precision. And then, to make the story stick, he sent a photograph. A photograph of Lina, in what appeared to be an orange jumpsuit. The kind of jumpsuit worn by someone in custody. He told them this was from his visit to see her, that he had gone to the facility to see his wife, that this was what her situation looked like. Lina, behind bars, serving 5 years, for shoplifting. The family sat with this information. It was strange. The photo was strange, Pilar would later say. Nothing quite added up. But what explanation was there? Why would a husband lie? What reason would he have? So they waited. And as January turned toward its end, David Varela communicated with them one more time. January 31st, the last message the family received from him. And then, nothing from him either. He stopped responding too. The family tried. Again and again. His phone went unanswered. His messages went unread. And now the alarm inside them was impossible to ignore. Something was wrong. Something more than a shoplifting arrest. Something that no one in the family could fully name yet. But that everyone, in their bones, already felt. Lina's brother, who lives in Miami, Florida, made the decision. He called the Norfolk Police Department. he filed a missing persons report. February 2nd, 2026. He had not heard from his sister in more than 2.5 weeks. She was a daily caller who had gone silent. Her husband had offered an explanation that made no sense and had then also gone silent. The brother in Miami did what needed to be done. He called the police. He was right to be worried. He was right to call, because by the time he made that call, Lina had already been dead for weeks, and her body was in the freezer, in the apartment, in downtown Norfolk, while David Varela was already making his final preparations to leave the country. At first, it didn't make sense, but then the search began. Norfolk Police took the report seriously. This was not a woman who had wandered away. This was a specific person, reported missing by her family, who had not communicated with anyone in over 2 weeks. A woman who called her family every day, morning, afternoon and night, who had gone completely silent, whose husband was also not responding to calls, whose husband had stopped responding to his Navy command as well. Virginia State Police issued a critical missing adult alert. The language of that alert was specific and significant. It said that Lina Guerra's disappearance poses a credible threat to their health and safety as determined by the investigating agency. That language does not appear in every missing persons case. It reflects a determination by investigators that something is genuinely wrong, that this is not a person who chose to step away, that there is reason to fear for their life. Lina Guerra was described as 4 feet 9 inches tall, 100 pounds, a small woman, in a city where she had few connections, no friends allowed by her husband, no job, no independent network, no colleagues who might have noticed she stopped showing up, no gym membership, no regular appointments, no community ties, just a husband who was not answering his phone. Investigators attempted to reach David Varela. He did not respond. Not to police, not to his family, not to his Navy command. His superiors had tried repeatedly. The behavior was described as extremely out of character. An active duty Navy reservist who does not respond to calls from his command is not a small thing. Military service carries obligations. When an enlisted member stops responding, it raises immediate flags. And yet, silence. On February 4th, the same day the missing persons report was officially filed with Norfolk Police, David Varela boarded a commercial flight. Destination, Hong Kong. He left while his wife was being reported missing. He left while Norfolk Police were beginning their investigation. He left while his Navy command was trying to reach him. He left while Lina's family in Colombia, thousands of miles away, waited for answers that would never come from him. He was already in the air, and on February 5th, one day after he departed, Norfolk Police executed a search warrant. The apartment at the Icon Building, 300 East Main Street, downtown Norfolk. They entered. They searched, room by room, looking for signs of Lina, looking for evidence of what had happened. And in the kitchen, inside the freezer, they found her. Lina Maria Guerra Echevarria, 39 years old, 4 feet 9 inches tall, 100 pounds. The pillar of her family, the woman who called every day, found in a kitchen freezer, in an apartment in downtown Norfolk, Virginia, while her husband's plane was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. The moment that apartment door opened, and those officers found what they found, that moment changed the nature of everything. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was a homicide investigation, and the primary suspect was already gone. What they found next changed the case completely. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner conducted an autopsy. An autopsy is the systematic, clinical examination of a body after death. It is conducted by a medical examiner, a physician, whose job is to determine cause of death, manner of death, and any other relevant physical facts. In cases like this, the autopsy is one of the most critical pieces of evidence in the entire investigation, because it speaks for the victim when the victim can no longer speak. It says, this is what happened to this person. This is what was done to them. This is how they died. The results were released on February 11th. Lina Guerra's death was ruled a homicide. The cause of death, blunt head trauma and asphyxiation. 2 causes, combined, not 1, 2. Blunt head trauma, she had been struck. Asphyxiation, she had been prevented from breathing. These are not accidental findings. These are not the findings of a fall, or a medical emergency, or a sudden collapse. These are the findings of a deliberate act of violence. Someone had hit her, and someone had smothered her. or strangled her, or otherwise stopped the air from reaching her lungs. And then someone had put her body in the freezer and gone on living in that apartment, going to work, sleeping in that bed, eating food from that kitchen, using that freezer, while her body was inside it. And when the family in Colombia called and texted and asked where Lina was, that same someone had constructed a story, had found a photograph, had fabricated an explanation, had sent messages about being devastated, about not eating, about not sleeping. The lie had bought him time, from January 16th, the last day the family heard from Lina, to February 4th, the day he boarded his flight. 19 days. Almost 3 weeks. Think about that. For 19 days, David Varela lived in that apartment, with Lina in the freezer. He went through the motions of whatever daily life looked like. He responded to the family's messages. He fabricated evidence. He sent photographs. He performed grief. He made plans. He researched flights. He packed. And on February 4th, he left. 1 day before police arrived. 1 day before the search warrant was executed. 1 day before investigators found what he had done. The timing of that departure was not coincidence. It was calculation. He knew the family was getting suspicious. He knew the lies were running out. He knew that sooner or later, someone was going to call the police. And he made sure that when that happened, he was already gone. 19 days. 19 days in which Lina's family waited, worried, and tried to believe a story that never made sense, while Varela prepared his escape. And now, it wasn't just a local case anymore. It was something bigger. Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney, Rahman Fatihi, had been a prosecutor for nearly 20 years. State cases, federal cases, homicides, complex financial crimes, cases that required coordination across agencies. He had seen a lot. But this one was different from the start. Not because of the crime itself, as horrifying as it was, because of where the suspect had gone. Fatihi was direct about the challenge he was facing. "This is only the second case where I've had to involve Interpol," he told reporters. The first was more than a decade earlier, when he was a federal prosecutor. That case had gone all the way to the Italian Supreme Court before the suspect was brought back to face justice. He noted the comparison not to suggest that Italy and Hong Kong were equivalent situations. They are not, but to communicate something important. This was rare territory. Going on 19 years as a state and federal prosecutor, involving Interpol was not something Fatihi did regularly, and Hong Kong presented particular challenges that Italy did not, because of a decision made in August 2020, when the United States government suspended its extradition agreement with Hong Kong. That decision came in response to the national security law passed by Hong Kong under pressure from Beijing. Critics argued that the law fundamentally altered Hong Kong's legal system, dismantling the independence that had made it, in legal terms, a reliable partner for Western democracies. In response, the United States ended the agreement that had governed the surrender of fugitives between the two jurisdictions. The practical result, as of early 2026, was stark and specific. If a person charged with a crime in the United States made it to Hong Kong before being arrested, there was no automatic legal mechanism to bring them back, no treaty obligation, no guaranteed cooperation. Hong Kong authorities could choose to cooperate, or they could choose not to, and the United States had limited leverage to compel them. David Varela had made his way to one of the most complicated jurisdictions on earth for American law enforcement to reach. Whether by research, by calculation, or by a kind of dark luck, he had chosen well, but not well enough. Fatihi was not giving up. He was not pretending the path was clear, but he was not walking away either. "It's a matter of time and luck," he said. "We have to first locate and detain the suspect in another country before extradition can even begin. Time, and luck, and the willingness to keep pushing." The agencies involved were substantial. The FBI, the same agency whose director would eventually announce the arrest, was working the case. NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, was involved, given Varela's military status. Homeland Security investigations, the U.S. Marshals Service, the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service, and Interpol itself. The red notice had been issued. David Varela's name and face were circulating through the systems of 190 countries. Somewhere in Hong Kong, a man who thought he had escaped was being looked for by the machinery of international law enforcement. He just did not know yet how many people were looking, or how determined they were, or that the decision to flee to Hong Kong, which may have seemed like an escape, would ultimately not be enough. As Fatehi would later say after the arrest, "It's possible to hide for some period of time. It's possible to go far away, but that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get away." While investigators searched for answers, her family was already feeling the truth. While investigators searched and prosecutors filed paperwork and Interpol was notified, Lina's family in Colombia was trying to hold themselves together. They were thousands of miles away. They could not travel to Norfolk easily. They could not access the apartment. They could not see her. Pilar Echevarria, Lina's cousin, the one who was more like a sister, told reporters she still could not process what had happened. "I can't believe it," she said. "I still can't process the death. I can't process, especially, the way she died. The way she died. In a freezer. In a kitchen. Alone. While the man who had isolated her from everyone she loved, who had taken away her job, her friends, her freedom, made his escape. Her aunt, Elizabeth Echevarria, was direct in her grief. "It's awful he took my little girl away." 5 words. But they carry everything. The family was also facing a practical problem. Lina had once expressed that she wanted to be cremated, like her mother, but her remains were in the United States, in a city they could barely afford to travel to, in a country whose systems they did not fully know how to navigate. From thousands of miles away, with a language barrier making everything harder, "We have tried to communicate with the funeral home," Paola Ramirez said. "But from here it is a little complicated. We want them brought here, so we can hold a ceremony for her. But it's complicated when you're in another country, and even more with the language, which makes communication much harder." Eventually, a relative would travel from Colombia to the United States to claim Lina's ashes, to bring her home, or as close to home as possible. And by then, he was already gone. Norfolk Police charged David Varela with first-degree murder and concealment of a body, 2 Virginia state charges, and federal investigators added a third, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. The FBI was involved. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, was involved. Homeland Security Investigations was involved. The U.S. Marshals, the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service, and Interpol. Interpol issued what is called a red notice. A red notice is a request circulated to police forces in Interpol's 190-member countries. It is not technically an international arrest warrant. Different countries treat it differently, but it is the most powerful tool Interpol has for tracking fugitives across borders. David Varela's face and name were now in the systems of police forces around the world. WhatsApp data had already confirmed what investigators suspected. Shortly after February 5th, the day Lina's body was found, one day after Varela had left the country, location data from his WhatsApp account showed activity in Hong Kong. He was there. Investigators knew he was there. But knowing and reaching are 2 different things. The US had no extradition treaty with Hong Kong. Hong Kong police would have to cooperate voluntarily, and the geopolitical relationship between the United States and China in early 2026 was complicated. Fatehi expressed cautious optimism. He noted that Interpol could function even in the absence of a formal treaty, that cooperation was still possible, that patience was required. But he did not pretend it was certain. "I've learned that there is no such thing as certainty in our business," he would later say. On the other side of the world, he was still living like nothing had happened. Weeks passed. February became March. The case remained open. Lina's family in Colombia waited. Paola Ramirez, speaking to reporters periodically through a translator, wondered aloud whether justice would ever come, to know whether maybe he will pay for what he did. She said in one interview, "Sometimes we sit and talk, and wonder what his life is like, whether he can sleep, whether he is living normally as if nothing happened, whether he can sleep, whether he is living normally, as if nothing happened." Those words, and across the Pacific, in a city of 7 million people, David Varela was apparently doing exactly that. Living, moving through Hong Kong, meeting people. He had introduced himself to at least one woman, a Russian tourist he encountered while waiting in line at a local attraction, as a man from Miami, a US military man. He told her he was looking for a Russian wife. He was charming, apparently, normal. He suggested she come back to Hong Kong. She did. They spent time together. He sent her photographs. They stayed in touch by text message. A man accused of murdering his wife and hiding her body in a freezer was socializing in Hong Kong, meeting women, looking for a relationship, while Lina's family in Colombia grieved, while her ashes waited to be claimed, while investigators on multiple continents worked to bring him back. He had also, at some point, had surgery on his knee. His family in Colombia had mentioned that Varela had been on crutches at one point. There was a cane found on the floor of the Norfolk apartment when investigators arrived. He had been injured. He had recovered. He had left. Whatever he had done, whatever injury, whatever recovery, whatever private interior life he was carrying, he had made it to Hong Kong and was attempting to build something new, to become someone else, or simply to disappear into the anonymity of a massive city on the other side of the world. He did not know, could not have known, that the woman he had been spending time with had a friend, and that friend, before traveling back to Hong Kong, searched his name online, found the news coverage from Norfolk, Virginia, found the photographs, found the story of Lina Guerra, found the name David Varela, and recognized the man she had been reading about, the man standing in line at an attraction, the man who said he was from Miami, the man who was looking for a Russian wife, was the same man who was wanted for the murder of his Colombian wife in a Navy apartment in Virginia. The Russian woman contacted WTKR News 3 in Norfolk, the local station that had been covering the case since the beginning. She provided the number she had for... She provided photographs of the two of them together. She said she hoped Lina's family would find solace. I believe that only through collective efforts, compassion, and teamwork can we bring justice to the table, she said. She had no obligation to come forward. She was a stranger in Russia, connected to this case by nothing more than a chance encounter in a foreign city. But she came forward anyway. And that decision, that ordinary act of human decency from a woman thousands of miles from Virginia, would prove to be one of the final links in the chain that brought David Varela home. He introduced himself as David. He said he was from Miami, that he was a US military man, that he was looking for a Russian wife. He asked her to come back to Hong Kong. She did. They spent a day together. He sent her pictures. They stayed in touch by text. And then, before she traveled back to Hong Kong a second time, her friend searched his name online. She found the WTKR coverage of the case. She found the photographs. She found the story of Lina Guerra. And she was horrified. I hope Lina's family will find solace in this news, the Russian woman told WTKR. She provided the number she had for David. WTKR's investigative reporter, Margaret Kavanagh, placed a video call to the number using Telegram. A man answered. He matched the description. He answered to David. Kavanagh identified herself as a reporter. She asked if he had any comment about the accusations regarding Lina. The man covered the camera lens with his hand and hung up. He did not call back. He did not respond to further attempts, but he had answered and been seen. That moment, a suspected murderer answering a video call from a reporter in Virginia while hiding in Hong Kong, became one of the most extraordinary details of an already extraordinary case. But that didn't last forever. Investigators had confirmed the sighting. They knew where Varela was. They knew what he looked like. They knew the number he was using. The agencies involved, FBI, HSI, NCIS, U.S. Marshals, State Department, coordinated with Hong Kong authorities. In the absence of a formal extradition treaty, cooperation had to be built on other foundations. Interpol's Red Notice, diplomatic channels, the Hong Kong police force operating within its own legal framework. And on April 15, 2026, approximately 2 months and 10 days after Lina's body was found in that freezer, David Varela was apprehended in Hong Kong. FBI Director Kash Patel announced the arrest personally. On social media he wrote, FBI is announcing the successful overseas apprehension of David Varela, a 38-year-old Navy reservist, who is wanted for first-degree murder in connection with the death of his wife Lina Guerra. He added, Mr. Varela has been on the run for over 2 months attempting to avoid prosecution for these heinous crimes. But justice doesn't forget. Justice doesn't forget. 4 words. But for the family in Colombia, for Paula and Pilar and Elizabeth and the brother in Miami who had filed that missing persons report, those 4 words meant everything. Varela was taken from Hong Kong to San Francisco. He appeared before Magistrate Judge Alex Tse in federal court. T ordered federal marshals to transfer Varela to the Eastern District of Virginia. He was heading back to Norfolk to face what he had done. And when the call finally came, everything changed. In Colombia, it was a phone call. Paola Ramirez was there when the detective assigned to the case called to tell them. The whole family heard the news together. When the whole family learned the news, all we did was weep, she told NBC News through a translator. The very first thing we did was cry. We were trembling. She paused. We are grappling with so many conflicting emotions. That pause, that phrase. So many conflicting emotions. Because the family had loved David Varela too. He had been welcomed into their family. He had been Lina's husband. He had been someone they trusted. We too loved David very much, Paola said. We had welcomed him into our family as her husband. That is the particular grief of this kind of case. The betrayal does not only belong to the victim, it belongs to everyone who believed, to the family that accepted him, that trusted the photos he sent, that believed the lies, not because they were foolish, but because loving people requires trust. And some people exploit that trust in ways that are impossible to anticipate. Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney Ramin Fatiha expressed the relief that many felt. I was always hopeful that the long arm of the law would ultimately reach Mr. Varela and allow us to secure justice for Lina Guerra and her family, he said. But I've learned that there is no such thing as certainty in our business. He paused. It's possible to hide for some period of time. It's possible to go far away. But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get away. Now, he would have to answer for everything. David Varela now faces multiple charges. In the state of Virginia, first-degree murder and concealment of a dead body. In the federal system, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Additional charges are expected, including desertion, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, given that he abandoned his active duty military post. If convicted of first-degree murder in Virginia, he faces life in prison. Prosecutors have indicated they will seek a sentence that reflects the full severity of what he did, not just the murder, but the cover-up, the lie he told her family, the photograph in the orange jumpsuit, the weeks during which Lina's family grieved and wondered and believed a story he had fabricated, the flight to Hong Kong, the months of hiding, the Russian woman he met while looking for a new wife, the video call he answered and then ran from. All of it, every piece of it. But one detail in this case stands out more than anything else, the lie. Let us stay here for a moment with the lie, because it is one of the most disturbing details of this entire case. David Varela killed his wife, and then, at some point, perhaps immediately after, he did not simply leave. He constructed a cover story. He told Lina's family in Colombia that she had been arrested for shoplifting. 5 years, and he created evidence for that lie. A photograph of Lina in what appeared to be an orange jumpsuit. He sent messages expressing grief and shock. He described himself as devastated. He told them he had not stopped crying. He said he had not eaten. He performed grief while Lina's body was in the freezer in the next room. This is a level of cold calculation that is difficult to comprehend. Not just killing someone, but then turning to the people who loved her and looking them in the eye, through a screen, through text messages, through a photograph, and lying. Knowing they believed you, knowing that every day they spent believing the lie was a day you could use to prepare your escape. Investigators later confirmed what the family had suspected. There was no court record of Lina being charged with shoplifting. No arrest, no conviction, no record at all. She had never been charged with anything. The photograph was a fabrication. The grief was a performance. The lie nearly worked. It bought him 19 days. Enough time to plan. Enough time to pack. Enough time to book a flight. Enough time to get to the other side of the world. If not for the family's persistent worry, if not for the brother in Miami who called the police, if not for the investigators who took the missing persons report seriously, the lie might have held longer, long enough to make finding him even harder. And even then, bringing him back wouldn't be simple. It is worth understanding the challenge investigators faced. When David Varela landed in Hong Kong, he was betting on a specific legal reality. The United States and Hong Kong had maintained an extradition agreement for decades. That agreement was suspended in July 2020, after the United States government under President Trump signed an executive order responding to China's national security law in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong government had passed legislation that critics said fundamentally altered the city's legal system, compromising the independence that had made it, among other things, a place where extradition agreements with Western countries made legal sense. After the suspension, Hong Kong effectively became a jurisdiction where an American fugitive could potentially remain beyond the reach of US courts. No automatic return, no guaranteed cooperation. Varela had no known ties to Hong Kong. His family was from Colombia. He had spent years in Florida and Virginia. There was nothing obvious connecting him to that city, which suggests that his choice was not random. It was deliberate. He had researched where American law enforcement could not easily reach him. He had chosen accordingly, but there were factors he had not accounted for. First, Interpol. The red notice circulated to 190 countries does not require a treaty. It relies on cooperation between police forces. It is not guaranteed, but it is real. Second, the human factor. The Russian woman in line at an attraction in Hong Kong. The tip that came to a local news station in Norfolk, Virginia. The investigative reporter who placed a video call. The technology that put his face and his number in the right hands. Third, the willingness of Hong Kong authorities to act. When asked whether they had cooperated with US authorities, the Hong Kong police force told reporters they had acted in accordance with the law to foster police cooperation with other jurisdictions. They did not confirm specifics, but David Varela was arrested, and he was on a plane back to the United States within days. The legal machinery is complex, but justice still moved, because this wasn't just one moment. It was a pattern. This case does not exist in isolation. The details of David Varela's relationship with Lina Guerra, the jealousy, the isolation, the control, the prohibition on working, or having friends, or going out alone, describe a pattern that investigators and researchers recognize. It is called coercive control. It does not always begin with physical violence. It often begins with restrictions. Small, gradual restrictions that accumulate over time. You don't need to work. I'll take care of us. You don't need those friends. I'm all you need. You don't need to go out alone. I'll take you wherever you want to go. Each individual restriction can be framed as love, as protection, as devotion. Over time, those restrictions become a cage. The victim is cut off from the networks, friends, family, work colleagues, social contacts that might otherwise provide support, perspective, or an exit. They become dependent on the one person who is also the source of the danger. Lina had family in Colombia who loved her deeply, but they were thousands of miles away. They knew her voice every day on the phone. They did not see the apartment. They did not see the restrictions. They did not see the fear, because Lina, like so many women in her situation, protected them from it. She never spoke ill of him, Paula Ramirez said. She always spoke highly of David. That is not a failure of judgment. It is the behavior of someone managing an incredibly difficult situation as best they can. Someone who loves her family and does not want them to worry. Someone who perhaps hoped things would get better, or did not see a safe way out. The family says they believe Lina was killed in what they describe as a femicide. A killing motivated by gender, by a desire for control that could not survive her potential departure or resistance. The details that have emerged support that framing. A woman isolated, a woman controlled, a woman who could not work, could not have friends, could not go out alone, a woman whose death was then disguised, whose family was lied to, whose absence was weaponized against the people who loved her. This is not a random crime. This is a case study in what happens when coercive control reaches its endpoint. And then, something unexpected happened. There is one moment in this case that deserves its own space, because it is unlike almost anything else in recent true crime. Margaret Kavanagh is an investigative reporter for WTKR News 3 in Norfolk, Virginia. She had been covering the Lina Guerra case from the beginning. She had spoken to the family in Colombia. She had followed the investigation. She had reported on the charges, the flight to Hong Kong, the Interpol red notice. When the Russian woman came forward with the tip, with the phone number, with the photographs, with the story of a man who introduced himself as David and said he was looking for a Russian wife, Kavanagh did what investigative reporters do. She called the number, using the Telegram app. She placed a video call, and the call connected. A man appeared on the screen. He matched the description. He answered to David. Kavanagh introduced herself. She said she was a reporter. She said she was calling about Lina. She asked, Did you have any comment about the accusations regarding Lina? The man on the other end of that call. A man accused of murdering his wife and hiding her body in a freezer, who had been on the run for more than 2 months, who was hiding in Hong Kong on the other side of the world, covered the camera lens with his hand, and hung up. He did not speak, he did not deny, he simply covered the lens, and ended the call. Kavanagh published the story, the tip, the sighting, the contact, the hang-up. It put Varela's confirmed presence in Hong Kong into the public record, and investigators, already working the case, had one more piece to work with, one more confirmed data point, one more reason to press. The family in Colombia was grateful. Lina will now have justice, Paula Ramirez said, after the arrest. She won't return to us, but this will take the weight off of us. She added something that stays. We thank you and give gratitude to Margaret. You were the one who helped get him detained. The family is in debt to you for giving the attention. A family in Colombia, giving thanks to a reporter in Norfolk, for not letting their daughter, their cousin, their sister, their niece be forgotten. Now the case was moving forward. But it wasn't over. As of April 2026, David Varela is in federal custody. He has appeared before a magistrate judge in San Francisco. Federal marshals are transferring him to the Eastern District of Virginia. He faces state charges in Norfolk, first-degree murder, and concealment of a dead body. He faces federal charges, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. He faces potential military charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, desertion, given that he abandoned his active duty post without authorization. The Navy has confirmed its full cooperation with civilian and federal investigators. NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, has been part of this investigation from the beginning. The military justice system will likely have its own proceedings, separate from the civilian courts. David Varela served the United States Navy for more than a decade. He wore the uniform, he swore an oath, and then he murdered his wife, concealed her body, lied to her family, abandoned his post, fled the country, hid for 2 months, looked for a new wife, while his wife's ashes were being claimed by a relative traveling alone from Colombia to retrieve them. There are no charges for the audacity of that. There is no law against it, but it is part of the record, part of the picture of who David Varela is, and what he did, and what Lina's family will carry for the rest of their lives. And questions started to come up, questions no one had asked before. One detail in this case is worth examining carefully. When Norfolk Police first became involved, when the missing persons report was filed, when they began trying to reach David Varela, they contacted his Navy command. His supervisors tried to reach him. He did not return their calls. This was described as extremely unusual. It was out of character for him. David Varela was described as a reliable soldier, someone who responded when his command called. The fact that he stopped responding to the Navy, to police, to his wife's family, simultaneously, on the same day, tells a story. He did not stop responding because he was overwhelmed by grief. He stopped responding because he was already gone. He had made a calculation. He had decided that disappearing was his best option, and he had executed that disappearance with a kind of cold efficiency that is, in its own way, a portrait of who he is. The Navy released a statement confirming its cooperation. The Navy is aware of the ongoing investigation led by Norfolk Police Department involving the death of a Navy spouse in the Norfolk area and is in full cooperation with local, state and federal law enforcement. NCIS is conducting a joint investigation with Norfolk Police Department. Navy spouse. That phrase. Lina Guerra was a Navy spouse. She had moved to Norfolk because of her husband's military assignment. She had left her family, her life in Miami, her connection to her roots. She had followed him to a city where she knew almost no one, where she had no job, no friends, no independent life, because that was the only life he allowed her. And then he took even that. Before this story ends, we go back to Lina. Before this story ends, we return to where it began. Not with the crime, not with the flight, not with the arrest, with Lina. Lina Maria Guerra Echevarria was 39 years old when she died. She grew up in Colombia. She had a small, close family. She called them every day, morning, afternoon, night. She had a cousin who was more like a sister, an aunt who called her my little girl, a sister-in-law who described her as the pillar of the family, a brother in Miami who loved her enough to call the police when she went silent. Before she came to the United States, she lived with her cousin in Medellin. Before she met David Varela, she was a waitress in Miami. Working, living, building something. The family said she was adventurous, hard-working, humble, always putting others first. She was a woman filled with immense kindness, Paola Ramirez said after Varela's arrest. She always put others before herself. She was 4 feet 9 inches tall, 100 pounds, small, and in an apartment in downtown Norfolk, a man who was supposed to protect her instead took her life and put her in a freezer and lied about it and ran. Lina did not get to choose who came after her in that investigation. She did not get to choose the reporters, the prosecutors, the detectives. She did not get to choose whether Interpol moved fast enough, whether the treaty mattered, whether the tip came in time. She was already gone. But the people who loved her did not stop. Her brother filed the report. Her family answered every call from every reporter. They spoke through translators from thousands of miles away. They kept her name in the story. They made sure she was not forgotten. And the reporters, and the detectives, and the prosecutors, and eventually, the Hong Kong authorities who made the arrest possible. All of them, in their own way, were answering for Lina, were saying that her life mattered, that you cannot put a woman in a freezer and lie to her family and fly to the other side of the world and simply get away. That justice, as it was said after the arrest, does not forget, because this case is about more than what happened. There is a temptation, in true crime, to focus on the perpetrator, on the cunning of the escape, on the drama of the international manhunt, on the strange detail of the video call, answered and then abandoned. Those elements are part of this story. They are what make it unusual. What make it something people search for, talk about, try to understand. But they are not what this case is about. This case is about what happens inside a relationship, where one person holds all the power, where jealousy is treated as love, where isolation is presented as protection, where a woman slowly loses access to the structures, work, friendship, freedom, family contact, that would otherwise anchor her to a life outside that relationship. Lina's family, speaking from Colombia, described patterns that had been in place for years. She was not allowed to work, not allowed to have friends, not allowed to go out alone, not allowed to study. These are not the features of a healthy relationship. They are the features of a trap. And when Lina died, and the family was lied to, and Varela ran, those patterns became visible. To the prosecutors, to the reporters, to the public. Too late for Lina, but perhaps in time for someone else. Because that is also part of what these stories do. They make visible what is usually invisible. They name the pattern. They show what it looks like from the outside. They give it a shape that other people can recognize. In their own lives. In the lives of people they love. And perhaps, in some small way, they make it harder for the trap to close unnoticed next time. Even now, not every question has been answered. As of April 2026, David Varela is in federal custody, awaiting transfer to Virginia. His trials, state and federal, have not yet begun. The facts of exactly what happened inside the Icon apartment have not been presented in court. The exact date of Lina's death is not yet publicly confirmed. It is not known precisely when she died. It is not known what happened in the hours or days before her death. It is not known what she was thinking, what she knew, whether she was afraid. These are the questions that will be examined in the proceedings ahead. And there are other questions. Questions about the Navy. Questions about what Varela's command knew or should have known about the situation at home. Questions about whether the systems designed to support military families, including military spouses relocated to new cities, functioned as they should. Lina Guerra was in Norfolk because of David Varela's military assignment. She was alone in that city because of the restrictions he had placed on her life. The intersection of those two facts, military relocation and coercive isolation, is something the case will inevitably raise. Whether those questions produce changes in policy or practice remains to be seen. What is certain is that they are part of the picture, and in the end, this is what remains. The case is not closed. The trial has not happened. Varela has not been convicted. Under American law, he is innocent until proven guilty. But Lina's body was found, and the cause of death was ruled a homicide. And the man charged with her murder chose to run rather than face the investigation. He ran to the farthest corner he could find. He hid for 2 months. He answered a video call from a reporter and hung up rather than speak. Those are not the choices of an innocent man. They are the choices of someone who knows what the evidence shows. The trial will determine the rest. And when it does, the family in Colombia will be watching, from thousands of miles away, speaking through translators, holding each other, remembering the woman who called them every day, morning, afternoon, night, the woman who put others before herself, the pillar of the family, the little girl, Lina, for Lina Maria Guerra Echevarria, 39 years old, from Colombia, loved by a family that never stopped looking, never stopped asking, never stopped saying her name. She was the pillar of their family. She deserved so much more than what happened to her. And the people who loved her made sure the world knew it.